The sound of a plate shattering against marble floor silenced the entire steakhouse. A muscular man in a BJJ Academy shirt stood over a father and his teenage son, sneering. "Get up, old man. Show your boy what a real fighter looks like." The father, Mark Davis, slowly set down his fork, his calloused hands steady, despite 200 people watching. What happened next would become legend in that small Texas town. Stick around to see how a quiet father taught everyone what true strength really means, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The evening had started like any other Friday at Morton's Steakhouse in downtown Austin. The dinner rush was in full swing with the familiar symphony of clinking silverware, sizzling meat from the open kitchen, and the low hum of conversation filling the dimly lit dining room. Mark Davis had chosen this place specifically for tonight. It was his son Tyler's 16th birthday, and despite the tight budget that came with being a single father working construction, he wanted to make it special. They'd arrived at 7:30, both dressed in their best clothes, which for Mark meant the charcoal blazer he'd bought at Goodwill 3 years ago, now showing wear at the elbows, and for Tyler the button-down shirt they'd picked up at Target last week. The hostess had seated them at a corner booth near the window, and Mark had been grateful for the relative privacy. He knew they didn't quite fit the usual Morton's clientele of business executives and well-heeled couples, but Tyler's eyes had lit up when he saw the menu, and that made every penny worth it. "Dad, are you sure about this place?" Tyler had asked, his voice low as he glanced at the prices. "We could have just gone to Outback or something." Mark reached across the table and squeezed his son's shoulder. "You only turned 16 once, buddy. Besides, I've been putting in extra hours at the Riverside construction site. We deserve this." The truth was more complicated. Mark had been working 70-hour weeks for the past 2 months, taking every overtime shift he could get. The divorce 3 years ago had cleaned him out financially, but he'd never let Tyler see him sweat about money. Not once. The boy had been through enough watching his parents' marriage crumble. They just ordered ribeye for Tyler, sirloin for Mark when the trouble started. A group of 5 men entered the restaurant, their voices carrying above the ambient noise. They wore matching black rash guards with Apex BJJ Academy emblazoned across the chest, and they moved with the particular swagger of fighters fresh from training. The hostess tried to direct them to the bar to wait for a table, but the apparent leader of the group, a broad-shouldered man with cauliflower ears and tribal tattoo sleeve, his arms waved her off. "We'll wait right here," he said, his voice thick with the kind of confidence that came from never being challenged. His name was Derek the Destroyer. Hoffman, though Mark didn't know that yet. In the Austin MMA scene, Derek was notorious, a legitimate black belt under the Gracie lineage with a record of 22 wins and 3 losses in regional promotions. He ran Apex Academy like his personal kingdom, and his students followed him with the devotion of disciples. Derek's eyes swept the dining room like a predator surveying territory. They landed on Mark and Tyler's table, taking in the worn jacket, the modest orders, the obvious father-son dynamic. Something in his expression shifted a slight smirk that his companions recognized. Derek loved what he called teaching moments, opportunities to demonstrate his superiority over what he considered lesser men. "Look at that," Derek said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Father-son bonding over well-done steak. Bet Daddy's teaching him all about how to be mediocre." His crew chuckled obediently. Mark heard the comment but didn't react, keeping his attention on Tyler, who was excitedly talking about making the varsity basketball team. "That's fantastic, son. Coach Morrison knows talent when he sees it." But Derek wasn't satisfied with being ignored. He had consumed 3 beers during training, and the alcohol mixed with post-workout adrenaline was making him aggressive. He walked closer to their table, his students trailing behind like hyenas. "Hey, Pops," Derek called out. "That members-only jacket from 1987, very retro." Several nearby diners looked up from their meals. A woman at the adjacent table whispered to her husband, who shook his head and returned to his salmon. Mark's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he continued cutting his steak with deliberate precision. "Dad," Tyler whispered, his cheeks flushing red. "Just ignore him." "That's right, kid," Derek laughed. "Tell Daddy to keep his head down. That's what betas do. They teach their sons to be betas, too." He turned to his crew. "This is exactly what's wrong with this generation. Weak fathers raising weak sons." The restaurant manager, a thin man named Felipe, noticed the developing situation and started making his way over, but Derek's reputation preceded him. Several staff members had seen him fight at local events, and Philippe hesitated, calculating whether intervention was worth the risk. Mark set down his knife and fork, wiping his mouth with his napkin. His movements were unhurried, controlled. "Tyler, why don't you go wash your hands before dessert comes?" "Dad, I don't need to." "Go ahead, son." Tyler recognized the tone, the same one his father used when a storm was coming, and he needed to secure the construction site. He slid out of the booth and headed toward the restrooms, though he didn't go in, instead positioning himself where he could still see the table. Mark looked up at Derek for the first time, and something in his eyes made the fighter's smirk falter for just a moment. They were calm, almost serene, but there was a depth to them that spoke of experiences Derek couldn't fathom. These weren't the eyes of a construction worker who'd never seen violence. They were the eyes of someone who'd seen too much of it. "I'm trying to have dinner with my son," Mark said quietly. "I'd appreciate it if you'd let us finish in peace." Derek laughed, but it sounded forced now. "Oh, he speaks—" "Tell me something, Pops. When was the last time you did anything that mattered? When was the last time you weren't just taking up space?" "Every day I work to provide for my son matters," Mark replied. "Every moment I spend with him matters. Now please leave us be." The quiet dignity in Mark's response seemed to infuriate Derek more than any challenge could have. Here was a man who wouldn't rise to the bait, wouldn't play the game Derek had mastered. In Derek's world, there were two types of men fighters and victims. Mark didn't seem to be either, and that contradiction needed correcting. "You know what your problem is," Derek said, placing both hands on Mark's table and leaning in close enough that Mark could smell the beer on his breath. "You've forgotten what it means to be a man. Sitting there in your thrift store jacket teaching your kid to be a pushover. When I was his age, my father made sure I could defend myself, made sure I could defend our family's honor." "Honor," Mark repeated as if tasting the word. "Is that what you call this?" The restaurant had gone quiet now. Phones were coming out, their owners sensing viral content in the making. A couple near the entrance quietly asked for their check. The tension was thick enough to cut with one of Morton's steak knives. Derek straightened up his face, flushing red. "You got something to say about how I carry myself." "I think you're scared," Mark said simply. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Derek's students exchanged glances, shocked that anyone would speak to their instructor that way. Derek himself seemed momentarily stunned. "Scared?" He laughed, but there was an edge to it now. "I'm a 3-time state champion, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I've got more submission victories than you've got years left to live. And you think I'm scared?" "Terrified," Mark confirmed. "Scared that if you're not the loudest, the strongest, the most aggressive man in every room, people might see who you really are. Scared that without the tough guy act, you're just another insecure bully who never grew out of high school." The slap of Derek's hand on the table made several diners jump. "Get up." "No." "I said get up." Derek grabbed the back of Mark's chair and yanked it back from the table. Mark had to catch himself to keep from falling. "You want to psychoanalyze me? Let's see how much talking you do when you're tapping out." Mark stood slowly. Not because he was intimidated, but because he was making a decision. He could see Tyler watching from across the room, could feel his son's fear and confusion. He could walk away, de-escalate, maybe even get management to intervene. That would be the smart play, the responsible choice. But he also saw something else in Tyler's eyes. The same look he'd had 3 years ago when his mother had screamed at Mark in the courthouse parking lot, calling him a failure and nobody, while Tyler watched from the car. Mark had taken it all in silence then, for Tyler's sake, to avoid making a scene. But silence in the face of abuse wasn't strength. It was just another form of submission. "If I do this," Mark said quietly, "will you leave us to finish our meal?" Derek grinned, the expression predatory. "When I'm done with you, you'll be leaving on a stretcher." "That's not what I asked." "Fine. After you tap, and you will tap, I'll let you crawl back to your table, if you can still move." Mark nodded and stepped away from the table, moving into the open space near the bar. The crowd parted, forming a rough circle. Someone was already live streaming the caption reading BJJ Black Belt v says Random Dad. Steakhouse Showdown. Derek rolled his shoulders, loosening up with practiced efficiency. Any last words? Tough guy. Want to apologize now and save yourself the embarrassment. Mark was removing his jacket with careful precision, folding it neatly and placing it on a nearby chair. Underneath his arms were corded with the kind of muscle that came from actual labor, not gym sessions. But more interesting were the scars, a long, pale line across his left bicep, several smaller marks on his forearms, and what looked like old burn marks on his hands. I don't want to hurt you, Mark said simply. Derek laughed. That's my line, Pops. He dropped into his fighting stance, the classical BJJ position, slightly crouched, hands forward, weight balanced. It was textbook perfect, the result of 15 years of training. Mark, on the other hand, stood almost casually, his hands loose at his sides, his breathing steady and deep. You going to fight or just stand there? Derek taunted. I'm waiting. For what? For you to realize you can still walk away. That was the final straw. Derek shot forward with explosive speed, going for a classic double-leg takedown. It was his signature move, the one that had won him dozens of matches. His shoulder aimed for Mark's midsection arms, reaching to wrap around his legs, the perfect setup for a ground game where he'd be unstoppable. But Mark wasn't there. He'd moved not dramatically, not with any flashy technique, just a simple pivot that left Derek grasping air. The fighter's momentum carried him forward, and Mark's hand found the back of his neck, guiding him face first into the bar with a controlled but firm motion. The crack of Derek's nose against the mahogany bar made everyone wince. He stumbled back, blood already streaming down his face, his eyes wide with shock and rage. You son of a... He charged again this time, leading with strikes, a combination of punches and kicks that would have destroyed most opponents. But Mark moved like water, each attack finding only empty space. It wasn't just that he was dodging. He seemed to know where each strike would be before Derek threw it. Stop holding back and fight! Derek screamed, his composure completely shattered. I am fighting, Mark replied calmly. Just not the way you're used to. Derek went for a flying armbar, a spectacular move that looked impressive even when it failed. But Mark caught him midair, their bodies tangling for a moment in what should have been Derek's territory. The ground game, the wrestling, the submissions. This was where BJJ practitioners were kings. But something was wrong. Every grip Derek attempted, Mark countered. Every transition, every sweep, every submission attempt met not with resistance but with redirection. It was like trying to wrestle water. And then Mark did something that made several people in the crowd gasp. He applied a rear naked choke, but not the standard version taught in every BJJ school. This was something older, something that predated sport fighting. The angle was different, the pressure points precise, and Derek found himself going from predator to prey in less than 2 seconds. This is called a blood choke, Mark said quietly, his mouth close to Derek's ear. Right now, I'm cutting off blood flow to your brain through your carotid arteries. You have about 6 seconds before you pass out, 4 seconds before you risk permanent damage. The difference between those 2 seconds is control, and control is what separates a warrior from a thug. Derek's hand slapped frantically at Mark's arms, the universal sign of submission tapping out. But Mark held on for another heartbeat, not long enough to cause harm, but long enough to make a point. Do you yield? Mark asked formally, as if following some ancient protocol. Derek's tapping became more frantic, his face, purple eyes bulging. Only then did Mark release him, standing smoothly and stepping back as Derek collapsed to his hands and knees, gasping and coughing. The restaurant was dead silent except for Derek's labored breathing. His students stood frozen, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. Their instructor, their black belt master, had been handled like a novice. Mark walked back to his chair, picked up his jacket, and put it on with the same careful precision he'd shown in removing it. Then he returned to his table, sat down, and picked up his fork as if nothing had happened. Tyler, he called softly. You can come back now. His son approached slowly, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion. Dad, what was that? Where did you learn to fight like that? Mark was quiet for a moment, cutting a piece of his now cold steak. Before you were born, I spent 8 years in the military. Special operations. There are things I learned there that I hoped I'd never have to use again. Special ops. You never told me that. It's not who I am anymore, son. I'm a construction worker. I'm your father. That's what matters. Derek had managed to get to his feet, his students helping him stay upright. His nose was clearly broken, his rash guard torn, and his pride shattered beyond repair. He looked at Mark with a mixture of fear and bewilderment. What are you? He managed to ask. Mark looked up from his meal. I'm a father having dinner with his son on his birthday. That's all I ever wanted to be tonight. The choke. That wasn't BJJ. That wasn't anything I've seen. No, Mark agreed. It wasn't. Your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a sport with rules and regulations. It's designed for competition for points and submissions in a controlled environment. What I learned was designed for survival when the only rule is coming home alive. Philippe, the manager, had finally found his courage and approached Derek's group. Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Derek's students started to protest, but Derek held up a hand. He was staring at Mark with something approaching respect now. Marine Delta, Mark replied simply. The single word hit Derek like a physical blow. Delta Force, the elite of the elite. The warriors who operated in shadows, whose missions were classified, whose skills were legendary, even among special operations units. I couldn't have known, Derek said, and for the first time that night, he sounded genuinely humbled. You couldn't have, Mark agreed, but that's the point. You never know who someone really is, what they've been through, what they're capable of. That man you call weak might have faced down terror you can't imagine. That woman you dismiss might have survived horrors that would break you. Every person deserves respect until they prove otherwise. You proved otherwise tonight. Derek nodded slowly, then turned to Tyler. Your father, he's the real deal, kid. Whatever he teaches you, listen to every word. He limped toward the exit, his students supporting him. At the door, he turned back one more time. I'm sorry. He said the words seemingly painful to speak. For everything. Mark nodded once, accepting the apology, then returned his attention to Tyler. The restaurant slowly came back to life, conversations resuming in hushed, excited tones. Several people approached to shake Mark's hand or pat him on the back, but he politely declined the attention focused entirely on his son. Dad, Tyler said, after a long moment, why didn't you ever tell me about Delta Force? Mark considered his words carefully. Because that was about taking lives, son. Everything I do now is about building one yours. The skills I learned there, the violence I was capable of, I put all that away when you were born. Tonight was an exception and not one I'm proud of. But you were incredible. The way you moved, the way you... Tyler. Mark's voice was firm but gentle. Fighting should always be the last resort. What you saw tonight wasn't strength, it was failure. I failed to de-escalate. I failed to find a peaceful solution. The only reason I engaged was because walking away would have taught you the wrong lesson about standing up to bullies. But real strength is what I do every day. Getting up at 5 in the morning to work construction, coming home exhausted but still helping you with homework, saving money for your college fund instead of spending it on myself. That's strength. Tyler was quiet for a moment, processing. But you could have been famous, right? As a fighter, with those skills. Fame from violence isn't fame worth having, Mark said. I'd rather be nobody special who raised a good son than a celebrity who raised a stranger. The waiter approached tentatively with their dessert, a birthday cake they'd ordered earlier. As he set it down, he whispered, Sir, the gentleman who left asked me to give you this. He handed Mark a business card. It was Derek's card for Apex BJJ Academy. On the back, written in pen, were the words, If you ever want to teach real warriors, the job is yours. With respect, Derek. Mark looked at it for a moment, then handed it to Tyler. Keep this. Why, to remember that everyone deserves a second chance. Mr. Hoffman acted poorly tonight, but he learned something. He apologized. He grew. That takes its own kind of courage. Tyler pocketed the card, then looked at his father with new eyes. Mom was wrong about you, wasn't she? when she said you were just a nobody going nowhere. Mark's expression softened. Your mother was angry. People say things when they're angry. But she was wrong. What matters isn't whether she was wrong or right. What matters is that you know I'll always be here for you, always protect you, always love you. Whether I'm a nobody or a somebody doesn't change that. The cake arrived with 16 candles, and the nearby diners spontaneously began singing Happy Birthday. Tyler blushed, but smiled, and Mark watched his son with quiet pride. This wasn't how he'd planned the evening to go, but perhaps it was what Tyler needed to see, that his father, the quiet construction worker who drove a 10-year-old pickup truck and wore secondhand clothes, was also a man of principle, capability, and depth. As Tyler blew out his candles, Mark noticed something else. The live stream videos were already going viral. Father destroys BJJ black belt bully was trending. His phone set to silent was lighting up with messages from numbers he didn't recognize. The outside world was intruding on their moment. We should go, Mark said quietly after Tyler had eaten a slice of cake. But we haven't gotten the check. The gentleman took care of it, the waiter said, approaching again. The one who left. He paid for your entire meal and left a substantial tip for the staff. He also asked me to tell you that he'll be closing his academy for a week to, and I quote, reconsider what true martial arts means. Mark stood helping Tyler with his coat. As they walked through the restaurant, the other diners watched with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Several were still recording, but Mark ignored them, his hand on Tyler's shoulder guiding him toward the exit. Outside, the Austin night was warm and humid, the streets busy with the usual Friday night crowd. Tyler was practically vibrating with excitement and questions, but Mark steered him toward their truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that had seen better days but still ran reliably. Dad, people are going to want to know about this. The videos are everywhere already. I just checked my phone and... Let them wonder, Mark said, starting the engine. The truth isn't nearly as interesting as what they'll imagine. But Dad, you're a hero. You stood up to that bully you showed everyone. I showed everyone that violence, even when justified, leaves everyone diminished, Mark corrected. Mr. Hoffman left humiliated and injured. I had to reveal parts of my past I'd rather keep buried. And you had to see your father be someone I've tried very hard not to be anymore. Where's the victory in that? They drove in silence for a few minutes, Tyler processing his father's words. Finally, he spoke again. Delta Force, though. That's amazing, Dad. Why didn't you stay in... Mark's hands tightened on the steering wheel, and for a moment his eyes went somewhere far away. Because I saw what constant violence does to a man's soul. I saw friends lose themselves in it, become people their families didn't recognize. When your mother told me she was pregnant with you, I knew I had a choice. Continue down that path and risk becoming someone you'd fear, or walk away and become someone you could respect. I chose you, and Mom still left. Your mother had her reasons. They weren't about you, Tyler. Never think that. She said you had no ambition, that you were content being ordinary. Mark pulled into their apartment complex, a modest place but clean and safe. He turned off the engine and faced his son. There's nothing ordinary about raising a good human being. There's nothing ordinary about honest work. And there's nothing ordinary about choosing peace over violence, even when violence would be easier. Your mother wanted something I couldn't give her: status recognition, the kind of life you see on social media. I wanted something simpler. I wanted to be your dad. They got out of the truck and headed up to their second-floor apartment. As Mark unlocked the door, Tyler asked one more question. Do you regret it? Giving up that life? Mark pushed open the door to their small but tidy home. Tyler's basketball trophies lined one shelf. His honor roll certificates were framed on the wall. Pictures of the two of them from various camping trips and baseball games decorated the hallway. Every night when I come home, no matter how tired I am, no matter how hard the day was, I open this door and I'm not Delta Force Operator Davis, I'm just Dad. And Tyler, he turned to his son with a smile. That's the only title I ever wanted to keep. As they settled in for the night, Mark's phone continued to buzz with notifications. The video had gone properly viral now, millions of views across various platforms. But Mark didn't check any of them. Instead, he sat with Tyler on their worn couch watching SportsCenter and talking about the upcoming basketball season. Dad, Tyler said during a commercial break. Yeah. I'm proud that you're my father, not because of what you did tonight, but because of what you do every day. Mark felt his throat tighten with emotion. Thanks, son. That means everything. And Dad? Yeah. Best birthday ever. Mark laughed, pulling his son into a hug. Even with all the drama, especially with the drama, none of my friends are going to believe this story. Well, there's video evidence now, so they'll have to. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Tyler spoke again. Do you think Mr. Hoffman will really change? Mark considered the question. I think tonight shook his worldview. He built his entire identity around being the toughest man in any room. When that was challenged, he had two choices: double down on his ego or reconsider his approach. The fact that he apologized and paid for our meal suggests he chose growth. That's not easy for someone like him. You could have hurt him badly, couldn't you? I could have ended him, Mark said quietly. But that's not who I am anymore. Violence should protect, not punish. I did what was necessary to end the threat, nothing more. Is that what they taught you in Delta Force? No, Mark admitted. That's what you taught me by being born. Every choice I make, I think about the man you're watching me become. That's my true north now. The phone rang the landline, which almost never received calls. Mark frowned and answered it. Mr. Davis? This is Amanda Chen from ESPN. We've been trying to reach you about the video from tonight. We'd love to do an interview. Mark hung up. It rang again immediately. This time it was someone from Fox News, then CNN, then a podcast host with millions of followers. Mark eventually unplugged the phone. They're not going to stop, are they? Tyler asked. Not for a while, but they'll move on to the next story soon enough. They always do. Don't you want to tell your side? My side is sitting right next to me eating leftover birthday cake for breakfast tomorrow, even though I'm going to pretend I don't know about it. Tyler grinned sheepishly. How did you never mind? As they prepared for bed, Mark made one last check of the locks, an old habit from his operational days. Tyler noticed and felt safer for it. His father might dress like a regular construction worker, might drive an old truck, and live in a modest apartment, but Tyler now knew the truth. His father was a guardian, a protector, a man who had walked through darkness and chosen light. Good night, Dad. Good night, son. Happy birthday. As Mark lay in his own bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about the evening's events. He'd spent 13 years building a quiet life, a normal life, a life where Tyler could grow up feeling safe and loved without the shadow of violence. Tonight had cracked that facade, revealing the warrior underneath the working man's clothes. But perhaps that was okay. Perhaps Tyler needed to know that his father's gentleness was a choice, not a weakness. That real strength wasn't about domination, but about restraint. That the most dangerous men in the room were often the ones who seemed the most at peace. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he checked it. Mr. Davis, this is Derek Hoffman. I wanted to apologize again properly. What you said tonight changed something in me. I've been teaching fighting, but not wisdom. I've been creating bullies, not warriors. If the offer stands, I'd like to learn from you, not your techniques, but your philosophy. The way you controlled that situation, the way you controlled yourself, that's what I want to become. With respect, Derek. Mark read it twice, then typed a simple response. Meet me at Zilker Park tomorrow 6 a.m. Bring running shoes. He set the phone aside and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the viral video, the attention, the questions. But tonight his son was safe asleep in the next room, proud of his father, not for his violence, but for his values. And that Mark thought, as sleep finally took him, was victory enough. The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., but Mark was already awake, had been for the past hour. Old habits from his operational days never truly died. The hypervigilance, the inability to sleep past dawn, the constant assessment of threats even in the safety of his own home. He dressed quietly in running gear and stepped out onto the small balcony of their apartment, watching the Austin skyline slowly lighten with the approaching sunrise. His phone showed 47 missed calls and over 200 text messages. The video had exploded overnight. Someone had even created a Wikipedia page about the incident, though Mark suspected it would be taken down soon for lack of notability. He scrolled through some of the messages, interview requests, sponsorship offers from martial arts equipment companies. 3 different book publishers wanting his life story. He deleted them all without responding. At 5:45, he left a note for Tyler and headed to Zilker Park. The morning air was thick with humidity, typical for Austin in late summer, and the park was mostly empty except for a few dedicated runners and dog walkers. He found Derek Hoffman already there sitting on a bench near the running trail looking like he hadn't slept at all. His nose was bandaged, both eyes blackened, and he moved stiffly when he stood to greet Mark. "You came," Mark said, not particularly surprised, but acknowledging it nonetheless. "I've been here since 5, Derek admitted. "Couldn't sleep. Kept replaying last night in my head, trying to understand what happened. Not the fight I can analyze technique all day, but what you said about fear about what I've become. That's what kept me awake." Mark began stretching, methodical and thorough. "We're going to run 6 miles. Can you manage that with your injuries?" "I've competed with worse," Derek said, though his breathing suggested otherwise. They started at an easy pace, Mark letting Derek set the rhythm. For the first mile, neither spoke, just the sound of their feet on the trail and the occasional greeting to passing runners. Finally, Derek broke the silence. 23 years, he said between breaths. "That's how long I've been training. Started when I was 12 after some kids jumped me walking home from school. My dad enrolled me in the local BJJ school the next day. Said no son of his would be a victim." Mark maintained his steady breathing, listening without judgment. "By the time I was 18, I was winning tournaments. By 25, I had my black belt and my own school. Everything I built was about never being that scared 12-year-old again. And then last night you called me out on it in front of everyone. Said I was terrified. And the worst part, you were right." They passed a group of cyclists, the morning traffic in the park beginning to pick up. Mark noticed Derek was already struggling with the pace his breathing labored, but he didn't slow down. "Fear isn't the enemy," Mark finally said. "Fear keeps us alive. It's what we do with fear that defines us. You let it turn you into someone who needs to dominate others. That's not strength, that's compensation." "Easy for you to say," Derek gasped. "You're Delta Force. You're trained to be fearless." Mark actually laughed at that, a short, sharp sound. "Fearless son. I was terrified every single day I was operational. Terrified of dying, of failing my team, of becoming the kind of monster war can create. The difference was I learned to function despite the fear, not because I didn't feel it." They reached the 3-mile turnaround point. Derek was drenched in sweat, his face pale beneath the bruising. Mark slowed the pace slightly, a small mercy. "Last night," Derek said, "when you had me in that choke, I saw something in your eyes. Not anger, not satisfaction. It was like you were somewhere else, remembering something." Mark was quiet for several strides. "Afghanistan, 2011. A Taliban fighter couldn't have been more than 19. I had him in the exact same hold. He was reaching for a grenade about to take out my entire squad. I held that choke for 7 seconds, 2 seconds longer than you." Derek understood the implication and felt his stomach turn. "You killed him." "I did what was necessary to protect my team. Just like last night, I did what was necessary to protect my son, not from physical harm, but from learning the wrong lesson about strength. But both actions carry weight. Both leave marks you don't see." They were approaching the parking lot again, the run nearly over. Derek was practically stumbling now, his martial arts conditioning no match for actual endurance training. Mark slowed to a walk for the cool-down. "Why did you agree to meet me?" Derek asked once he'd caught his breath. "Because you apologized," Mark said simply. "Not the public apology in the restaurant that was about saving face. The text you sent that was real. It showed growth, and growth should be encouraged." Derek nodded, wiping sweat from his eyes. "I want to learn. Not fighting techniques, God knows you could probably teach me things that would revolutionize my game, but the other stuff, the control, the philosophy. How to be strong without needing to prove it." "First lesson," Mark said, leading them to a water fountain. "Stop calling it your game. Fighting isn't a game, it's a responsibility. Every technique you know, every skill you possess comes with the obligation to use it wisely or not at all." "That's very Buddhist." "It's practical. The moment you treat violence as sport, you forget its consequences. Those kids you train at Apex, what are you really teaching them?" Derek was quiet, considering. I thought I was teaching them self-defense, confidence, discipline. You were teaching them that physical dominance equals worth. That's why you brought them with you last night like a pack. You were showing them how an alpha behaves, except there's no such thing as an alpha, not in human society. That's just insecurity wearing a costume. They sat on a bench as other runners passed by. The sun was fully up now, the Texas heat already beginning to build. Derek was processing everything, his worldview shifting with each revelation. My ex-wife said something similar once, he admitted. Said I was so busy trying to be a warrior that I forgot how to be a human being. I thought she just didn't understand the fighter mentality. She understood perfectly, Mark said. The question is whether you're ready to understand it too. Before Derek could respond, Mark's phone buzzed. It was Tyler, awake and worried about where his father had gone. Mark texted back that he'd be home soon with breakfast tacos from their favorite food truck. I should go, Mark said, standing. My son's awake. Wait, Derek said, pulling out his phone. The video from last night, it's everywhere. 3 million views on the main upload alone. People are calling you a hero, saying you're everything wrong with toxic masculinity getting put in its place. Others are analyzing your technique, trying to figure out your training background. Someone even started a petition to get you to open your own dojo. Mark shook his head. The internet loves a spectacle. By next week, they'll have moved on to something else. I don't think so. This touched something deeper. Look at the comments, thousands of people sharing stories about their own experiences with bullies, about fathers who stood up for them or didn't. You've become a symbol. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to be a dad who works construction. Derek studied him for a moment. With your skills, you could make millions. MMA coaching, private security. Hell, you could write your own ticket. Why construction? Because it's honest work. At the end of the day, I can point to something I helped build: a home, an office, a school, something that will shelter people where they'll make memories. That's worth more to me than any amount of money from teaching people how to hurt each other. Even if teaching them could help them protect themselves. Mark considered this. There's a difference between teaching protection and teaching violence. Most martial arts schools claim to do the former, but actually do the latter. You want to really help people, teach them situational awareness. Teach them de-escalation. Teach them that the best fight is the one that never happens. Would you teach that with me at Apex? No, Mark said firmly. I'm done with that world. Derek looked disappointed, but nodded. I understand, but can we meet again? Keep talking. I have 13 years of bad habits to unlearn. Mark was about to refuse when he remembered Tyler's words from the night before about second chances. Saturdays, same time, same place. We run, we talk. That's all I can offer. That's more than I deserve after last night. Mark started walking toward his truck, then turned back. Derek, you asked about my training. The technique I used on you, it's called a bagua choke. It's not from any military manual. An old man in Kandahar taught it to me, a former Mujahideen fighter who'd lost both sons to the war. He said the only reason to learn violence was to understand why it should be avoided. Took me years to understand what he meant. Derek absorbed this information like a student receiving wisdom. And now I build things instead of breaking them. I raise a son instead of training soldiers. I choose creation over destruction every single day. That's my jihad, my struggle. Not against others, but against the violent man I was trained to be. The drive back to the apartment was quick, with a stop at Torchy's Tacos for breakfast. Tyler was waiting on the couch, still in his pajamas, watching YouTube videos of the incident. He quickly closed the laptop when Mark entered. It's okay, Mark said, setting down the bag of tacos. I know you're curious. Dad, you're famous, like actually famous. Someone made a TikTok edit of the fight set to music, and it has 5 million views. There are memes everywhere. They're calling you Dad Force and the father figure. Mark unwrapped a taco and handed it to Tyler. Internet fame is like cotton candy, sweet attention grabbing, and ultimately without substance. It'll dissolve soon enough. But Dad, some of these comments, people are saying you represent something important, that you showed what real masculinity looks like. There's even a hashtag, #BelikeMark. Tyler, real masculinity isn't about what happened last night. It's about consistency, reliability, emotional availability. It's about admitting when you're wrong, crying when you're sad, asking for help when you need it. One dramatic moment doesn't define a man, thousands of small, unglamorous moments do. Tyler bit into his taco, thinking. Mom called this morning. Mark paused mid-chew. Did she? She saw the video, wanted to know if it was real. When I said yes, she got really quiet. Then she said she needed to reconsider some things. Your mother is allowed to process this however she needs to, Mark said carefully. This doesn't change anything about our arrangement. She also said something else. Said she might have been wrong about you, about the whole no ambition thing. Mark set down his taco and looked at his son seriously. Tyler, I need you to understand something. I didn't do what I did last night to prove anything to your mother, to the internet, or even to that Derek fellow. Every choice I've made since leaving the military has been about being the father you deserve. Not the most impressive father, not the richest or most famous, just the most present, the most reliable, the most loving. That's my only ambition. I know, Dad. That's what I told her. They ate in companionable silence for a while. Then Tyler asked, what happens now with all this attention? We go on with our lives. I go to work Monday morning. You go to school. We have basketball practice Tuesday night. Life continues. But what if people recognize you? Then they recognize me. It doesn't change who I am or what I need to do. The weekend passed in a blur of normalcy that Mark fought to maintain. He took Tyler to his basketball practice, fixed the leaking faucet in the bathroom that had been dripping for weeks, did laundry meal prepped for the week ahead. But the outside world kept intruding. Reporters showed up at the apartment complex only to be turned away by the property manager. Someone leaked Mark's work address, and a crowd gathered at the construction site Monday morning. His foreman, an old-timer named Bill, who'd hired Mark without asking too many questions about his past, pulled him aside. Mark, I don't care what you did or didn't do in that restaurant. You're one of my best workers, and that's all that matters to me. But this circus is becoming a safety hazard. Maybe you should take a few days off, let things cool down. Mark appreciated the offer but declined. Bill, if I hide it, validates their attention. I'm just a construction worker who defended himself, nothing more. But it was impossible to work with photographers taking pictures through the fence and people shouting questions. By lunch, Mark realized his presence was putting his coworkers at risk. Someone could get hurt with all the distractions. He made the difficult decision to take Bill up on his offer. Walking to his truck, he found someone waiting for him. A woman in her 50s, professionally dressed, but with kind eyes. She didn't have the aggressive energy of a reporter. Mr. Davis, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm a psychologist who specializes in veteran reintegration. I'm not here about the video, not exactly. I'm here because I recognize the signs. Mark's defenses immediately went up. I'm not interested in therapy. I'm not offering it. I'm offering perspective. That 1,000-yard stare in the video, the mechanical precision of your movements, the way you immediately return to baseline after extreme violence, these are tells, Mr. Davis. Tells of someone who's seen too much and is working very hard to keep it contained. I appreciate your concern, but my brother was Delta, she interrupted. Came back from Syria a different person. Took him 3 years to even admit he needed help. By then his marriage was over, he'd alienated his kids, and he was drinking himself to death. He's better now, but he lost a lot of time trying to handle it alone. Mark stood by his truck keys in hand, torn between fleeing and listening. I'm not saying you need therapy, Dr. Chen continued. From what I can see, you've built good coping mechanisms, routine purpose, focusing on your son. But that video shows a moment where your past broke through. And once that door opens, it's hard to close. What do you want from me? Nothing. I wanted to give you my card in case, and to tell you that what you did choosing to be a father over a warrior, that's the hardest transition any operator makes. Most fail. The fact that you've succeeded for 13 years, that's remarkable. But this incident might have stirred things up. She handed him a business card and walked away without another word. Mark stood there for a moment, then got in his truck and drove home. Tyler was already back from school doing homework at the kitchen table. Dad, you're home early. Construction site was too chaotic. Took the day off. Tyler looked at him with those perceptive eyes that reminded Mark so much of his ex-wife. You okay? Yeah, buddy, just processing some things. Is it about the fighting? Do you miss it? Mark sat down across from his son. No, I don't miss it. But sometimes the past has a way of reaching into the present, no matter how far you've run from it. Like PTSD. Mark was surprised by his son's directness. Where did you learn about that? We studied it in health class, about veterans coming home. Mr. Rodriguez, our teacher, he was in Iraq. He talked about how hard it was to adjust to normal life after being in combat. It's not quite PTSD, Mark said carefully. It's more like, imagine you learned a language that you never wanted to speak again, but then someone forces you to speak it, and suddenly you remember you're fluent. That's what last night was, speaking a language I'd promised myself I'd forgotten. Tyler put down his pencil. But you didn't forget. No, you never really forget. You just choose not to use it. Is that why you've been having nightmares? Mark looked up sharply. What? I heard you last night, and the night before, talking in your sleep, sometimes yelling. It started after the restaurant thing. Mark ran a hand over his face. He thought he'd been quiet, thought Tyler hadn't noticed. I'm sorry if I woke you. You didn't. I was already awake thinking about everything. Dad, should I learn to fight, to defend myself like you did? This was the question Mark had been dreading. What do you think? I think I want to be able to protect people I care about. But I also saw what it did to that Derek guy, turned him into someone who needed to hurt others to feel strong. I don't want that. Then you've already learned the most important lesson. The purpose of strength isn't domination, it's service. If you want to learn self-defense, I'll teach you. But I'll also teach you when not to use it, which is almost always. Would you teach me what you did to Derek? That choke boy. No, that's not for you to know. Some knowledge is too dangerous to pass on. I'll teach you boxing, some basic grappling, mainly how to create distance and escape. The goal is always to get away, not to win. Tyler nodded, then asked another question that surprised Mark. Do you think Derek will actually change? I don't know. Change is hard, especially when you've built your entire identity around something. But he showed up this morning for our run, so that's a start. You went running with him. We talked. He's got a long way to go, but recognizing you have a problem is the first step to solving it. That evening, they were eating dinner when there was a knock at the door. Mark approached cautiously, checking through the peephole. It was his ex-wife, Jennifer. He opened the door, genuinely surprised. Jen, Tyler didn't mention you were coming by. He doesn't know. Can we talk? She looked different, older, tired, but also somehow softer than he'd seen her in years. The designer clothes were gone, replaced with simple jeans and a t-shirt. The elaborate hairstyle had given way to a simple ponytail. Tyler's inside, Mark said. We can talk out here. They stood on the small landing outside the apartment, the awkwardness palpable. I saw the video, she began. Everyone's seen it by now. My phone hasn't stopped ringing, friends, family, everyone wanting to know if that was really you. It was really me. That's not what I mean, and you know it. The man in that video that wasn't the man I was married to. Or maybe it was, and I never really knew you. Mark leaned against the railing, choosing his words carefully. You knew exactly who I was, Jen. I was a man trying very hard to be normal, to be the husband you wanted, the father Tyler needed. Sometimes that meant suppressing parts of myself that didn't fit that image. Delta Force, she said, shaking her head. 8 years of special operations. When were you planning to tell me? Never. It wasn't relevant to who I was trying to become. Wasn't relevant. Mark, I accused you of having no ambition, no drive, no killer instinct. I said you were content being mediocre. Do you have any idea how wrong I was? You weren't wrong. I was content with what you call mediocre. Still am. A steady job, a small apartment, dinner with my son, that's all I want. But you could have so much more. With your skills, your training. Jen, stop. His voice was firm, but not unkind. This is exactly why I never told you. You'd have wanted me to capitalize on it, to use it for advancement, for money, for status. But that life, those skills, they came from a place of darkness I never want to revisit. The man who earned those skills did things that would horrify you. The fact that I'm capable of extreme violence doesn't make me more valuable. If anything, it makes me more dangerous. She was quiet for a moment, processing. I thought you were weak. When I yelled at you during the divorce, called you all those names, and you just took it, I thought you were pathetic. I took it because fighting back would have accomplished nothing. You were hurting, angry, and needed someone to blame. I could absorb that without breaking. That's not weakness, Jen. That's a choice. I'm sorry, she said, suddenly the words tumbling out. For all of it. For not seeing who you really were. For making you feel like you weren't enough. For poisoning Tyler against you. You didn't poison him. He's smart enough to form his own opinions. Still, I was wrong about everything. Mark studied his ex-wife, seeing her perhaps clearly for the first time in years. We wanted different things, Jen. That doesn't make either of us wrong, just incompatible. You wanted success as the world defines it. I wanted peace. Neither is better, they're just different. Do you have it? Peace? Mark thought about the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the constant effort to maintain normalcy. Then he thought about Tyler's laugh, about building something solid with his hands, about the simple pleasure of a quiet evening at home. Most days, yeah, I have peace. Jennifer nodded, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warm evening. I should go. Tell Tyler I'll call him tomorrow. Jen? Mark called as she reached the stairs. Thank you for coming by, for saying what you said. It matters. She gave him a sad smile and left. Mark stood on the landing for a few more minutes, processing the conversation. Inside, Tyler was pretending not to have been listening at the door. Autumn. Mom seemed different, Tyler said carefully. People change. Sometimes a shock to their worldview makes them reconsider things they were certain about. Do you still love her? Mark considered lying, giving the easy answer, but Tyler deserved truth. I love who she was when we were young and full of dreams. I love that she gave me you. But no, I don't love who she is now, and she doesn't love who I am. That's okay. Not all love is meant to last forever. That's sad. It's honest, and honesty, even when it's sad, is better than comfortable lies. They settled in to watch a movie, but Mark's phone kept buzzing. Finally, he looked at it. The caller ID showed a number he hadn't seen in over a decade, but recognized immediately. Colonel James Patterson, his former commanding officer in Delta. Against his better judgment, he answered. Sir? Davis, hell of a thing that video, recognized your movement pattern immediately. That modified Bagua choke gave you away. Only one person I know who learned that from the old Afghan. What do you want, Colonel? To offer you a job. Private sector consulting for a security firm I'm running now. Your little display has made you quite valuable. I'm talking 7 figures, Mark. Enough to set your boy up for life. Not interested. You haven't even heard the details. Don't need to. That life is over for me. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you just showed the world it's still very much alive. You can pretend to be a construction worker all you want, but we both know what you really are. What I really am is a father. Good evening, Colonel. He hung up and blocked the number. Tyler looked at him questioningly. Old life trying to pull me back, Mark explained. It's not happening. Was it a lot of money? More than we'd ever need. But you said no. I said no. Tyler smiled. Good. As the week progressed, the attention gradually began to fade, just as Mark had predicted. New scandals emerged, new videos went viral, and the internet's attention span moved on. There were still occasional recognition moments, someone at the grocery store asking for a selfie, a few people at Tyler's basketball game whispering and pointing, but life slowly returned to something approaching normal. Saturday morning came again, and Mark met Derek at Zilker Park. This time Derek was better prepared, his breathing more controlled, his pace more sustainable. I closed the academy for a week, like I said, Derek reported as they ran. Spent the time thinking, reading, even called my ex-wife to apologize for how I acted during our marriage. How'd that go? She hung up on me, but she called back an hour later. We talked for 3 hours. She said she never thought she'd hear me take responsibility for anything. And we're having coffee next week, not to reconcile that ship has sailed, but to find closure, maybe even friendship. They ran in silence for a while, then Derek asked, Did you mean what you said about fear, about being afraid every day in combat? Every single day? Mark confirmed. Fear of death. Fear of failure, but mostly fear of what I was becoming. You kill enough people, even bad people, and something inside you changes. You start seeing the world in terms of threats and targets. You lose the ability to see humanity, including your own. Is that why you left? I left because Jennifer was pregnant, like I told you, but also because I could feel myself disappearing. The Mark Davis who enlisted at 18, full of patriotic fervor and romantic notions of warfare, he was gone. In his place was something efficient, lethal, and empty. Tyler saved me from becoming a monster. You're not a monster. What I saw in that restaurant was controlled, measured. What you saw was muscle memory. For a moment, I wasn't a father protecting his son. I was an operator neutralizing a threat. The fact that I didn't kill you was conscious effort, not instinct. That's what scares me, how easily I could have gone further. Derek was quiet, processing this admission. I've hurt people in the cage in competitions, but it was always sport, always with rules and refs. I can't imagine. Don't try. Some knowledge isn't worth having. They finished their run, and as they cooled down, Derek pulled out his phone. The video's up to 10 million views now. Someone's even selling t-shirts with your face on them. Mark groaned. Please tell me you're joking. Wish I was, but here's the interesting part. I've been reading the comments, the discussions. It's not really about the fight anymore. People are talking about masculinity, about what it means to be strong, about the difference between warriors and soldiers. You've started a conversation. I didn't mean to start anything. Intent doesn't matter when something's in the world. You changed my life that night, made me question everything I thought I knew about strength. If you did that for me, imagine what you did for the thousands of young men watching, the ones looking for role models. I'm nobody's role model. You're Tyler's, isn't that enough? Mark considered this as he drove home. Tyler was shooting baskets at the small court behind their apartment complex when he arrived. Mark grabbed the ball and took a shot. It bounced off the rim. Your form's off, Tyler said, grinning. Elbows not aligned. When did you become the expert? When you were too busy becoming internet famous to practice with me. Mark laughed and tried again, this time sinking the shot. They played one-on-one for an hour, Mark intentionally keeping it close, letting Tyler work on his moves. As they sat on the court afterward, sweating and tired, Tyler asked a question that had clearly been on his mind. Dad, what really happened in Afghanistan? In the military. Mark had known this conversation would come eventually. He'd prepared for it, but now that the moment was here, the words felt inadequate. War happened, he said finally. I went thinking I'd be a hero fighting for freedom and democracy. Instead, I found myself in an ambiguous conflict where the enemies and allies were often indistinguishable, where victories were temporary, and where good people did terrible things because they saw no alternatives. Did you do terrible things, Song? I did necessary things that felt terrible. There's a difference, though. Sometimes it's hard to see. How many people did you? 43 confirmed. Each one had a name, a family, a story. Some were genuinely evil people who would have killed innocents. Others were just young men fighting for what they believed in, same as me. The distinction matters less than you'd think when you're looking at bodies. Tyler was quiet, absorbing this heavy truth. Do you regret it? I regret that it was necessary. I regret that violence was the only language we could speak to each other. But no, I don't regret protecting my team, completing our missions. That's the paradox of being a soldier. You can hate war while still being good at it. Is that why you work construction now, to build instead of destroy? Partly. Also because it's honest, simple, clean. I know what I'm building and why. There's no moral ambiguity in framing a house or pouring a foundation. As they walked back to the apartment, Tyler said something that stopped Mark in his tracks. I'm proud that you were a soldier, Dad, but I'm prouder that you chose to stop being one. That evening, Mark's phone rang with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, tired of the media requests, but something made him pick up. Mr. Davis, this is Sergeant First Class Maria Rodriguez. I served in Iraq 3rd Infantry Division. I'm sorry to bother you, but I needed to thank you. Thank me for what? For what you said in that video about choosing creation over destruction. My husband sent it to me. I've been struggling since I came home, feeling like I don't fit anywhere, like the only thing I'm good at is violence. Hearing someone else, especially someone from Delta, say they chose a different path, it helped. I'm glad it helped, Sergeant. There are a lot of us out here, sir. Veterans who are trying to figure out how to be normal again. Your story, it gives us hope that it's possible. After she hung up, Mark sat in the dark living room thinking. He'd spent so long trying to hide his past to pretend it didn't exist. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe acknowledging it, integrating it, was the only way forward. His phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Reopening the academy Monday. New curriculum, 70% de-escalation and situational awareness, 30% physical technique. Want to teach people to avoid fights, not win them. Thanks for the inspiration. Mark smiled despite himself. Real change was possible. Derek was proof of that. The following Monday, Mark returned to the construction site, hoping the circus had finally left town. Bill had been right to send him home the previous week. The disruption would have been dangerous with heavy machinery and workers trying to focus on their jobs. As he parked his truck and grabbed his tool belt, he noticed the absence of photographers and gawkers. Good. Maybe life could actually return to normal. But normal had shifted in subtle ways. His coworkers looked at him differently now, not with fear exactly, but with a new awareness. These men he'd worked alongside for 3 years sharing lunch breaks, and complaining about the Texas heat now knew he'd been something else entirely. Tommy, a young guy from El Paso who usually worked, the crane approached him during the morning coffee break. Hey, Mark, that video. Man, that was something else. We had no idea you were military. It never came up, Mark said, simply checking the blueprints for the day's work. Delta Force, though. That's like Navy SEAL level stuff, right? Something like that. Mark didn't want to get into the inter-service rivalry discussions that these conversations always spawned. My brother's in the Army stationed at Fort Hood. He says Delta guys are ghosts that nobody even knows their real names when they're active. Your brother talks too much, Mark said, but not unkindly. We've got foundation work today. You ready? Tommy took the hint and dropped the subject, but Mark could feel the questions hovering unasked throughout the day. It was Luis, the foreman's right hand and a Vietnam vet himself, who finally addressed it directly during lunch. Tough thing coming back, Luis said, sitting next to Mark on a stack of lumber. Tougher when people find out what you were capable of. They look at you like you might go back to being that other person. You never talked about your service, Mark observed. Nah. Different war, different time. We came back to spit and protests. You guys came back to thank you for your service and awkward silence. Not sure which is worse. They ate their sandwiches in companionable quiet for a moment before Luis continued. That thing at the restaurant, you handled it well. Could have gone much worse. It should never have happened at all. Shouldn't and didn't are two different things. You protected your boy, taught him something important. That's what matters. The afternoon shift was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. A black town car pulled up to the site, and a woman in an expensive suit stepped out, picking her way carefully through the construction debris in designer heels. Bill intercepted her, but she showed him something that made him point toward Mark. She was Asian, mid-40s, with the kind of bearing that suggested corporate power. Mr. Davis, I'm Linda Chang, CEO of Titan Security Solutions. I'd like to offer you a position. Not interested, Quar, Mark said, continuing to work on the rebar framework. You haven't heard the offer. Don't need to. The answer's no. She pulled out a check from her purse. This is just a signing bonus. The actual salary. Mark didn't even look at it. Ms. Chang, I appreciate you coming all this way, but I'm a construction worker. That's all I want to be. With your skills, you could protect CEOs, diplomats, people who really matter. Mark finally stopped working and turned to face her. The single mother living in the apartment we're building will matter to her children. The elderly couple who will spend their final years in the house we just finished matters to each other. Everyone matters to someone. I'm not interested in your hierarchy of human value. She seemed taken aback by his response. Most people would kill for this opportunity. I've killed for a lot less, Mark said quietly. That's exactly why I'm saying no. She left the check on a sawhorse and departed. Luis picked it up, whistled at the amount, then handed it to Mark, who tore it in half without looking at the number. That was probably stupid, Luis said. Probably, Mark agreed. But some things cost more than they pay. That evening, Tyler had basketball practice. Mark sat in the bleachers with the other parents, most of whom had seen the video by now. Some gave him respectful nods, others pretended not to notice him. But one father, Richard Brennan, whose son played point guard, made a point of sitting next to him. My son showed me the video, Richard said without preamble. I wanted to thank you. Nothing to thank me for. There is actually. My boy Kevin, he's been getting bullied at school. Some kids from the football team. He's been asking me to teach him to fight, and I was going to sign him up for MMA classes. After seeing what happened with you and that instructor, I'm reconsidering. Mark watched the kids run drills on the court. Fighting rarely solves bullying, usually makes it worse. Then what should I do? I can't just let him keep getting pushed around. Talk to the school. Document everything. Get other parents involved if their kids are victims too. Bullies rely on isolation and silence. Break both, and they lose their power. And if that doesn't work, then you teach him to defend himself enough to get away and find help. Not to win fights, but to survive them. There's a difference. Richard was quiet for a moment. You could teach him. I'd pay. I'm not an instructor, but there's a place, Apex BJJ Academy. The owner, Derek Hoffman, he's restructuring his entire program. Tell him Mark Davis sent you. He'll take care of your son the right way. Isn't he the guy from the video, the one you... He's also a man who recognized his mistakes and is working to fix them. That's the kind of person you want teaching your kid, someone who understands that strength without wisdom is just violence. After practice, Tyler was quiet in the truck. Mark knew his son well enough to wait him out. Finally, as they pulled into their apartment complex, Tyler spoke. Coach wants me to be more aggressive on the court. Says I'm too passive, too willing to pass when I should shoot. What do you think? I think maybe he's right, but after everything with the restaurant, seeing how aggression can go wrong, I don't know. I don't want to be that guy who has to dominate everyone. Mark parked and turned to face his son. There's a difference between aggressive and assertive. Aggressive is taking what you want regardless of others. Assertive is knowing your worth and not letting others diminish it. On the court, taking your shot when you're open isn't aggressive. It's respecting your teammates enough to contribute fully. Like how you stood up to Derek. I didn't stand up to him to prove I was better. I stood up because backing down would have taught you that bullies always win. It was about values, not victory. They were heading inside when Mark's phone rang. The caller ID showed his ex-wife again. Jen. Mark. I'm at the hospital. It's my father. He had a heart attack. I didn't know who else to call. Mark could hear the fear in her voice. Despite everything between them, she was still Tyler's mother, still someone who'd once meant everything to him. Which hospital? Says St. David's Medical Center. We'll be right there. Tyler looked confused as Mark turned back toward the truck. What's wrong? Your grandfather's in the hospital. We need to go. The drive was tense. Tyler's relationship with his maternal grandfather was complicated. The old man had never approved of. Mark had filled Tyler's head with stories about how his mother had married down. But family was family. They found Jennifer in the waiting room looking smaller and more vulnerable than Mark had ever seen her. She stood when they entered, and Tyler immediately hugged her. How is he? Mark asked. Stable, but they're saying he needs surgery, triple bypass. I can't process this. He's always been so strong, so invincible. He's going to be okay, Mark said, though he had no way of knowing that. He's tough, stubborn. That works in his favor now. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. He asked for you. Mark blinked in surprise. For me? He saw the video. Everyone's seen it by now. He said he was wrong about you, said he wanted to apologize before... She couldn't finish the sentence. Mark felt Tyler's hand slip into his, squeezing tight. Where is he, Room 314. But, Mark, you don't have to. He's Tyler's grandfather. That makes him family. The walk to room 314 felt longer than it was. Mark had faced Taliban fighters, had cleared buildings full of hostiles, but somehow facing his ex-father-in-law who'd spent years dismissing him as worthless felt more daunting. Harold Morrison looked diminished in the hospital bed, connected to various machines, his usually ruddy complexion pale and waxy. His eyes opened when Mark entered, and for a moment neither man spoke. You came, Harold said, his voice weak. You asked. I've been an ass. You were protecting your daughter. I understand that. Harold shook his head slightly. No, I was being a snob. You didn't fit my image of who Jennifer should be with. Not successful enough, not ambitious enough, not enough. But I watched that video and I realized something. Mark waited. You could have destroyed that man. The power you showed, the control, you could have killed him easily, but you didn't. You did exactly what was necessary, no more. That's not the action of a weak man. That's wisdom I never had. Mr. Morrison, Harold, please, I owe you that much at least. Harold, I never needed your approval. I just needed you to respect that I loved your daughter and would protect and provide for your grandson. And you did. Even after the divorce, even after I poisoned the well, you kept being a father, a good father. Tyler's lucky to have you. A nurse came in to check Harold's vitals, and Mark stepped back. As he was leaving, Harold called out, Mark, take care of them, Jennifer and Tyler. Whatever happens, take care of them. I will. Back in the waiting room, Jennifer was pacing while Tyler sat hunched in an uncomfortable chair playing with his phone to distract himself. Mark sat next to his son, and Jennifer eventually joined them. He apologized, she asked. He did. He's been different since the video, kept watching it over and over, asking questions about your military service. I think it shattered his worldview. The son-in-law he'd written off as a failure was actually, I'm still the same person he wrote off, Mark said. The video doesn't change who I am, doesn't it? You hid this entire part of yourself. From me, from everyone. Because that part of myself isn't who I choose to be. We are not our capabilities, Jen. We are our choices. I choose to be a construction worker, a father, a peaceful man. The fact that I'm capable of violence doesn't define me any more than your capability for cruelty during our divorce defines you. She flinched at that, but didn't argue. They sat in silence for a while, the hospital sounds creating a strange soundtrack to their vigil. Do you ever regret it? Jennifer asked suddenly. Leaving the military, giving up that life. Do you regret our divorce? Mark countered. She thought about it. Sometimes. Not because I think we should be together, but because of how I handled it. How I let my anger and disappointment turn me into someone I didn't recognize. Then you understand. I don't regret leaving the military, but I sometimes regret how I handled the transition. I shut down, closed off parts of myself, tried to pretend the past didn't exist. Maybe if I'd been more open about it, things would have been different. Or maybe not, Jennifer said. We wanted different things, Mark. You wanted peace and stability. I wanted excitement and success. The military background wouldn't have changed that fundamental incompatibility. Tyler had fallen asleep against Mark's shoulder, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the evening. Jennifer looked at them and something soft crossed her expression. You're a good father, she said quietly. Better than I gave you credit for. You're a good mother. We just had different ideas about what that meant. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Mark dozed fitfully in the uncomfortable chair, Tyler using his lap as a pillow, while Jennifer paced and drank terrible hospital coffee. Finally, near dawn, the surgeon emerged with good news. The operation had been successful. Harold would recover. As they prepared to leave, Jennifer stopped Mark. Thank you for coming. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Whatever happened between us, we're still connected through Tyler. That means something. The sunrise was painting the Austin sky in shades of orange and pink as Mark drove Tyler home. His son was quiet, processing the night's events. Grandpa's going to be okay? Tyler finally asked. Looks like it. He's tough. Like you. Different kind of tough. Your grandfather's tough came from privilege and expectation. Mine came from necessity and survival. Neither is better or worse, just different. Do you think he really changed his mind about you? Mark considered the question. I think near-death experiences have a way of clarifying what actually matters. Your grandfather realized that his judgments about success and failure were less important than family. That's growth, even if it came late. They got home just in time for Tyler to shower and change for school. Mark called Bill to say he'd be late, then made breakfast while Tyler got ready. As his son wolfed down eggs and toast, Mark noticed him checking his phone repeatedly. Everything okay? Tyler hesitated, then showed Mark the screen. Someone had posted a photo of them at the hospital, sitting in the waiting room. The caption read, Dad Force shows up for ex-wife's family emergency. Real strength is being there even when the marriage is over. I'm sorry, Mark said. I should have realized people would recognize us. It's okay, Dad. Actually, it's kind of nice that people are seeing this side of things. Not the fighting, but the showing up. That's the part that matters, right? Right. After Tyler left for school, Mark finally made it to the construction site. The morning had a different feel to it. His coworkers seemed to have processed the new information about him and moved past it. They were back to treating him like Mark the carpenter, not Mark the former Delta Force operator. It was a relief. During lunch, his phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Had my first class with the new curriculum this morning. 5 students walked out when I said we'd spend the first month on situational awareness and de-escalation. The 12 who stayed seemed genuinely interested in learning. It's a start. Mark typed back, the right 12 are worth more than the wrong 50. Also, Derek's next message read that Dad Richard Brennan came by with his son. Kid's been getting bullied. I'm working with him personally, teaching him confidence, not combat. Thanks for the referral. The afternoon brought an unexpected development. Bill called Mark over to the site office where a man in a suit was waiting. But this wasn't another job offer. It was an insurance investigator. Mr. Davis, I'm investigating a claim related to the incident at Morton's Steakhouse. Mr. Hoffman is claiming injury compensation. Mark tensed. He started the confrontation. Oh, we're aware. The video makes that clear. Actually, we're denying his claim and wanted to verify your account. But there's another matter. Morton's corporate office wants to ban you from all their locations. For defending myself. For the liability you represent. They're concerned about copycat incidents, people trying to provoke you for internet fame. Mark laughed, genuinely amused. They're banning me for being attacked in their restaurant. Corporate liability is complex, the investigator said, apologetically. Though between you and me, I think it's ridiculous. Tell Mortons they can keep their overpriced steaks. I'll cook at home. That evening, Tyler had another basketball game. This time, Mark noticed more people filming him in the stands than watching the actual game. He tried to ignore it, focusing on his son, who was playing with new confidence, assertive, but not aggressive, taking smart shots when they presented themselves. At halftime, Tyler's coach approached Mark. Whatever you said to him, it worked. He's playing like he believes he belongs out there. He does belong out there. You know, we could use an assistant coach, someone to teach the boys about mental toughness, about composure under pressure. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not a coach. You're a father who understands what real strength looks like. That's all these boys really need, a good example. Mark said he'd think about it, though he knew his answer would be no. He had enough on his plate without adding coaching to it. After the game, which Tyler's team won by 12 points, they went for ice cream at Amy's, a local place that had been their tradition since Tyler was little. As they sat outside eating their cones, Tyler brought up something that had clearly been bothering him. Dad, some kids at school are saying stuff. What kind of stuff? That you're a trained killer, that you're dangerous. Kevin Brennan told everyone his dad said you were Delta Force, and now people are afraid of you. Mark set down his ice cream, giving Tyler his full attention. Are you afraid of me? No, never, but I don't know what to tell them. Tell them the truth. That your father is a construction worker who loves you and would never hurt anyone who wasn't trying to hurt others. The past is past. What matters is who I choose to be now. But they keep asking for details about your military stuff, wanting to know if you've killed people, if you know classified secrets. And what do you tell them? Nothing. I say it's not my story to tell. Mark felt a surge of pride. That's exactly right. Thank you for respecting my privacy. They were walking back to the truck when a homeless veteran approached them. Mark could tell by the bearing, the faded unit tattoo on his forearm, the 1,000-yard stare that never quite left. The man didn't ask for money, just looked at Mark with recognition. I know you, the man said. Not from the video, from before. Kandahar 2012. You pulled my squad out of an ambush. Mark studied the man's face, trying to place him through the years of hard living written there. Then it clicked. Corporal Thompson. Just Thompson now. Lost the rank along with everything else. Thompson's hands shook slightly. Could be withdrawal, could be neurological damage, could be both. Tyler, give us a minute, Mark said. His son walked to the truck without argument. You saved 8 of us that day. Thompson said. Heard you caught hell for breaking protocol going outside the operational area. I did what needed doing, and I couldn't do anything after. Came home, fell apart. Wife left. Kids won't talk to me, can't hold a job. Everyone says, thank you for your service, but they don't want to deal with what that service cost. Mark pulled out his wallet, but Thompson waved him off. Don't want your money, just wanted to say, seeing that video, seeing you with your boy living normal, it gives me hope that maybe it's possible. It is possible, but you need help to get there. VA is useless. 6-month wait for appointments pills that make things worse. Mark pulled out Dr. Chen's business card, the psychologist who'd approached him at the construction site. Call her. Tell her I sent you. She specializes in veterans and her brother was special ops. She gets it. Thompson took the card with shaking hands. Why help me? Because 8 of my brothers came home that day in Kandahar. I'm just finishing the job. As they drove home, Tyler was quiet again. Finally, he asked, was that real? Did you really save his squad? It was a long time ago, but you did. Tyler, for every life saved, there were others lost. For every successful mission, there were failures. War isn't heroic. It's chaos where sometimes good people survive and sometimes they don't, and there's no meaning to any of it except what we create afterward. Is that why you have nightmares, because of the ones you couldn't save? Mark glanced at his perceptive son. Partly. Also because of the ones I didn't save the enemies. They haunt you differently, but they still haunt you. That night, after Tyler was asleep, Mark sat on his small balcony looking out over Austin's lights. His phone showed 17 missed calls from various media outlets. 3 more job offers and a text from Jennifer saying her father was awake and asking for Tyler to visit tomorrow. But the message that caught his attention was from Derek. Something you should know, that video has spawned copycats. 3 different incidents this week of people picking fights in restaurants hoping to go viral. It's becoming a problem. Mark called him immediately. What kind of incidents, Toto? Drunk idiots mostly challenging people they think look weak, hoping to either beat them up for clout or get beaten up for sympathy and views. 2 people hospitalized so far. Christ. Yeah. I've been contacted by a few other BJJ schools. We're thinking of putting out a joint statement condemning this behavior, making it clear that anyone who does this will be banned from all affiliated schools. Will that stop it? Probably not, but it's something. Mark, you might want to be careful. You're the original, the one they're all trying to recreate. Someone might come after you specifically. Let them come. I'm not changing how I live my life because of internet stupidity. But even as he said it, Mark knew things had changed. The simple anonymity he'd cultivated for 13 years was gone. He was visible now, marked, known. The quiet life he'd built was under siege, not from his past, but from a present that demanded spectacle and conflict. His phone buzzed with another text, this one from Luis at the construction site. Heads up. Reporter was sniffing around after you left, asking questions about your work, trying to find something controversial. Bill ran him off, but they're not giving up. Mark set the phone aside and tried to find the peace that usually came with the night silence, but it remained elusive, chased away by the knowledge that his carefully constructed normal life was crumbling one viral moment at a time. Inside, he checked on Tyler, who was sleeping peacefully, one arm hanging off the bed, his basketball uniform tossed on the floor, despite Mark's repeated reminders about the hamper. This simple, mundane moment of a teenager being a teenager, this was what Mark had fought to preserve, not with violence in some distant country, but with choices every single day to be present, to be normal, to be boring. But boring didn't go viral. Boring didn't get 10 million views. And now, whether he wanted it or not, Mark Davis was anything but boring to the watching world. He went to his own room knowing sleep would bring the dreams, not nightmares exactly, but memories given flesh. Tonight it would probably be Kandahar again. Thompson's squad pinned down the decision to violate orders and save them anyway. Or maybe it would be the boy with the grenade, the one who looked so much like Tyler would at that age. As he lay down, Mark made a decision. The world wanted to see him as a warrior, a fighter, a symbol of something. But symbols were just projections of other people's needs and fears. He was none of those things, and all of them. He was just a father trying to raise a good son in a complicated world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges visiting Harold in the hospital, dealing with Tyler's questions, facing whatever copycat idiots decided to test themselves against dad force. But tonight, in the darkness of his small bedroom, Mark Davis was just a tired construction worker who needed to be up at 5:30 for another day of building something solid and real. The last thing he thought before sleep took him was Tyler's voice from earlier. That's the part that matters, right? The showing up, the being there, the choosing to be present even when the past kept trying to pull you back. Yeah, Mark thought as unconsciousness finally claimed him. That's the part that matters. The dream that night wasn't about Kandahar or the boy with the grenade. It was about Tyler standing in a restaurant while strangers circled him with phones, demanding he prove himself, demanding he fight. Mark woke at 3 a.m. sheets soaked with sweat, heart hammering against his ribs. He padded to Tyler's room, needing to confirm his son was safe, sleeping peacefully. The boy had kicked off his covers and was sprawled across the bed, one foot hanging off the edge. Mark adjusted the blanket and returned to his own room knowing sleep was done for the night. He made coffee and sat at the small kitchen table reviewing the construction plans for the coming week. They were starting a new project, a community center in East Austin, the kind of place where kids could go after school instead of getting into trouble. It was the sort of build that made the work meaningful, that reminded him why he'd chosen this life. His phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he opened it. A video file taken at what looked like a bar in Dallas. Some drunk idiot in an affliction shirt was harassing an older man, pushing him, calling him out, while his friends filmed. The caption read, "Trying to find my dad force moment." The older man tried to walk away, but the drunk followed, eventually sucker punching him. The video cut off with the old man on the ground, blood pooling beneath his head. Mark's hands tightened on the phone until he worried the screen might crack. This was his fault. Not directly, but the connection was undeniable. His moment of violence, justified or not, had inspired others to seek their own viral fame through conflict. Another message came through, this one from Derek. "You seen this Dallas video, old man's in ICU, skull fracture. The attacker's already claiming he was standing his ground, that the old man threatened him first. Security footage shows otherwise, but the damage is done." Mark called him immediately despite the early hour. Derek answered on the first ring, sounding like he hadn't slept either. "This is spiraling," Derek said without preamble. "I've been monitoring social media. There's a whole subculture forming around recreating your video. They're calling it Finding the Father. It's sick. We need to do something." "Like what?" "You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Once something goes viral, it takes on a life of its own." Mark thought about Thompson, the homeless vet, about the construction workers who looked at him differently now, about Tyler navigating questions at school. "Maybe we can't stop it, but we can redirect it." "What do you mean?" "You're already changing your curriculum, focusing on de-escalation. What if we expanded that? What if we made a counter-narrative? You want to go public. I thought you were avoiding the media." "I was, but hiding isn't working. Maybe it's time to control the message instead of letting others define it." They agreed to meet later that morning after Mark dropped Tyler at school. As he prepared breakfast, his son emerged, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You're up early even for you," Tyler observed. "Couldn't sleep. How about pancakes?" "On a Tuesday, what's the occasion?" "No occasion. Just felt like making my son pancakes." As Tyler ate, Mark studied him, noting the new confidence in his posture, the way he'd started carrying himself differently since the restaurant incident. Not aggressive, but assured. It was a good change, but Mark wondered about the long-term effects of that night. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you," Tyler said, syrup dripping from his fork. "Some guys from school want to meet you. They're talking about starting a fighting club, and they want you to train them." "Absolutely not." "That's what I told them, but they're going to do it anyway. They've been watching YouTube videos practicing in Jimmy's garage. Someone's going to get hurt." Mark set down his coffee mug harder than intended. "Give me names." "Dad, I'm not a snitch." "You're not snitching. You're preventing serious injury. These boys have no idea what they're playing with." Tyler provided the names reluctantly, and Mark made a mental note to call their parents. But he knew that was just treating the symptom, not the disease. The disease was the glorification of violence, the idea that physical dominance determined worth everything he'd spent years trying to leave behind. After dropping Tyler at school with a promise to visit his grandfather that afternoon, Mark drove to Apex BJJ Academy. The place looked different from the outside new signage that emphasized personal development through martial arts rather than home of champions. Inside, he found Derek leading a class of middle-aged professionals through breathing exercises. Mindfulness before motion, Derek was saying. If you can't control your breathing, you can't control anything else. It was such a departure from the Derek of 2 weeks ago that Mark almost didn't recognize him. When the class ended, they sat in Derek's office, which had also been transformed. Gone were the trophy displays and fight posters, replaced with quotes about discipline, respect, and wisdom. "You weren't kidding about changing everything," Mark observed. "You opened my eyes to what I'd become, what I was creating. Every one of those trophies represented violence I'd committed or taught others to commit. Yeah, it was in a ring with rules, but the mentality was the same: dominate or be dominated." "And how are your students taking it?" "Lost about 60% of them. But the ones who stayed, they're here for the right reasons. Like that kid Kevin Brennan, he doesn't want to beat up his bullies. He just wants them to leave him alone. That's a goal I can support." Mark noticed a stack of printed emails on Derek's desk. "What's all that messages from other instructors around the country? Word spreading about what we're doing here. Some are calling me a traitor to the art. Others want to know more." "There's a hunger for this approach, Mark. People are tired of the warrior mythology. They want practical skills for real life." Which brings us to the media problem. Derek pulled up his laptop, showing Mark a compilation of Finding the Father videos, dozens of confrontations, most ending badly, all inspired by the original Morton's incident. "It's becoming a movement," Derek said, "and not a good one. These people are using your video as justification for violence." "Then we need to reclaim the narrative. You said other instructors are interested in your new approach." "Yeah, about a dozen so far." "What if we brought them together? Created a unified message about what real strength looks like? Not just you and me, but a coalition of instructors teaching de-escalation, emotional regulation, protective rather than aggressive mindsets." Derek leaned back in his chair, considering. "That's actually brilliant. We could call it the Peaceful Warrior Initiative or something." "No warriors," Mark said firmly. "That word's part of the problem. What about the Safe Strength Coalition focus on strength used for protection, not domination?" They spent the next 2 hours outlining a plan, reaching out to other instructors, drafting a statement. Mark was surprised to find himself engaged, even energized by the work. It felt like construction in a way, building something useful from raw materials. His phone rang just as they were finishing. It was Jennifer, and she sounded panicked. "Mark, something's happened at Tyler's school. There was a fight." Mark was out the door before she finished the sentence, Derek following. The drive to Tyler's school took 12 minutes, but felt like hours. Police cars were in the parking lot, an ambulance pulling away as they arrived. Mark found Tyler in the principal's office, holding an ice pack to his jaw, Jennifer beside him. "I'm okay, Dad," Tyler said immediately. "It's not what it looks like." The principal, Dr. Elaine Washington, was a woman Mark had met several times at school events. She looked stressed but relieved to see him. "Mr. Davis, there was an incident at lunch. Some students were attempting to recreate, they were trying to stage a fight for social media. Tyler attempted to intervene." "He jumped me," one of the other boys in the office protested. Mark recognized him as Jimmy Pearson, one of the names Tyler had given him that morning. The boy had a black eye and a sullen expression. "I didn't jump you," Tyler said calmly. "I stopped you from hurting David." Dr. Washington provided the full story. Jimmy and his friends had been pressuring David Chen, a smaller student, to fight them. When David refused, they'd started pushing him around phones, out-recording everything. Tyler had stepped in not to fight, but to create a barrier between David and the aggressors. Jimmy had swung at Tyler, who'd deflected the punch but taken an elbow to the jaw in the process. Teachers had arrived moments later. "Tyler's not in trouble," Dr. Washington assured Mark. "He was protecting another student. But Mr. Davis, this situation, this viral video culture, it's becoming a serious problem. We've had 3 similar incidents this week." Mark looked at his son, seeing Jennifer's fierce protectiveness and his own sense of duty combined in those young features. "You did the right thing," he told Tyler. "But we need to talk about technique. You telegraph your deflections." Tyler smiled slightly, then winced at the pain in his jaw. Jennifer shot Mark a look that was part exasperation, part amusement. That's your takeaway. He needs better technique. He needs to be able to protect himself and others without getting hurt. That requires proper training. Dr. Washington cleared her throat. Mr. Davis, I wonder if you might consider speaking to our student body about violence consequences, the reality versus the fantasy. Your voice carries weight right now, whether you want it to or not. Mark's instinct was to refuse to maintain his privacy, but looking at Jimmy Pearson's defiant face, at his son's bruised jaw, at the exhaustion in the principal's eyes, he realized hiding was no longer an option. I'll do it, he said, but I'm bringing help. That afternoon, after confirming Tyler was okay and didn't have a concussion, they visited Harold in the hospital. The old man looked better color returning to his face, though he was still weak. When he saw Tyler's bruised jaw, his eyes flashed with the old protective anger. Who did that to you? It's handled, Grandpa, Tyler said. Dad took care of it. I bet he did. Harold looked at Mark with something approaching respect. Thank you for coming yesterday, for being there when Jennifer needed you. Family shows up, Mark said simply. Harold was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised everyone. I've been thinking about that video, about what you said to that fighter. You told him he was scared that he was a bully who never grew out of high school. You could have been describing me. Jennifer started to protest, but Harold held up a hand. No, it's true. I've spent my whole life trying to dominate everyone around me in business, in family, in every interaction. I thought that was strength, but lying here possibly dying, I realized something. All that dominance, all that control, it left me alone. My wife died thinking I was cold. My daughter learned to be hard because that's what I valued. And I pushed away a son-in-law who had more real strength in his little finger than I had in my whole body. Harold? Mark began, but the old man cut him off. Let me finish. I built a fortune, but what good is it? I can't take it with me. What I can leave behind is a different legacy, a better example. Tyler, I want you to know something. Your father is the kind of man I should have been. Learn from him, not from me. Tyler squeezed his grandfather's hand. I can learn from both of you. Harold smiled weakly. Diplomatic. You get that from your mother. As they left the hospital, Jennifer walked them to the parking lot. That was unexpected, she said. I've never heard him admit weakness before. Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying priorities, Mark replied. Speaking of which, are you really going to speak at Tyler's school? Apparently. Want to join us United Front and all that? Jennifer looked surprised but pleased. Yes, actually. I think I would. That evening, Mark worked on his speech while Tyler did homework. He wrote and rewrote, trying to find the words that would reach teenagers who'd grown up on a diet of action movies and viral videos. Finally, Tyler looked up from his algebra. Dad, just tell them the truth. Not the Hollywood version, not the sanitized version. The real truth about violence. The real truth might be too much for them. Or it might be exactly what they need to hear. Mark studied his son, this young man who was growing up too fast, but growing up well. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. The next morning, Mark arrived at the school with Derek and 3 other martial arts instructors who'd agreed to participate. Dr. Washington had arranged for an assembly mandatory for all students. As Mark looked out at the sea of teenage faces, many holding phones despite the no-recording policy, he felt the familiar pre-mission tension. He started with a question. How many of you have seen the video from Morton's Steakhouse? Almost every hand went up. How many of you think what happened was cool? About half the hands stayed raised. Okay, let me tell you what you didn't see in that video. You didn't see me throwing up in the bathroom afterward, my body shaking from adrenaline. You didn't see the nightmares that followed memories of other violence mixing with the present. You didn't see my son having to answer questions about whether his father was dangerous. You didn't see the man I fought questioning everything he thought he knew about himself. The auditorium was quiet now, phones lowering. Violence, Mark continued. Even justified violence leaves scars on everyone involved. I've been in more fights than I can count real fights, not competitions or sparring matches. Life and death fights in places you've only seen in video games. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that every single one diminished me. Every punch thrown, every person hurt, took a piece of my humanity that I had to fight to get back. A student in the front row raised his hand. But you won. You beat that black belt easily. Did I win? My son had his birthday dinner ruined. A man was humiliated in front of his students. A restaurant full of people was traumatized. I was forced to reveal parts of myself I'd rather keep buried. Where's the victory in that? Derek stepped forward. I was the man in that video, the one who started the fight. And I can tell you there were no winners that night. I lost more than a fight. I lost my identity, my confidence, my sense of self. It forced me to confront who I'd become, and I didn't like what I saw. The students were fully engaged now, the reality of consequences sinking in. Mark continued for another 20 minutes, describing real violence without glorifying it, explaining the difference between protection and aggression, between strength and dominance. The other instructors shared their perspectives, each adding another layer to the message. Then Jimmy Pearson, the boy who'd started the fight yesterday, raised his hand. But what if someone disrespects you? You can't just let that go. Mark walked closer to the boy, his presence filling the space without threat. Son, do you know what real disrespect looks like? It's watching your friend bleed out in your arms because someone planted an IED. It's a child being used as a human shield. It's people with power destroying those without it for sport. Someone calling you names, challenging your masculinity, questioning your worth. That's not disrespect. That's insecurity, looking for validation. And giving them the reaction they want doesn't make you strong. It makes you a puppet dancing on their strings. The assembly ended with Derek announcing the Safe Strength Coalition, inviting students to attend free workshops on de-escalation and emotional regulation. The response was better than expected. Nearly 100 students signed up immediately. As they were leaving, Dr. Washington stopped Mark. That was powerful, thank you. Did it work, Matt? Time will tell, but you gave them something to think about besides viral fame. Over the following days, something unexpected happened. The speech, which someone had inevitably recorded despite the ban, went viral itself. But this time, the message was different. #RealStrength started trending, with people sharing stories of times they'd walked away from fights, chosen peace over violence, protected rather than dominated. Mark tried to ignore it all, returning to work at the construction site, maintaining his routine. But the world had shifted around him. The copycat incidents decreased, though they didn't stop entirely. The Safe Strength Coalition grew, with instructors from around the country joining. Saturday morning came again, and Mark met Derek for their run. This time they were joined by Thompson, the homeless vet, who'd called Dr. Chen and started getting help. He was shaky but sober, determined but struggling. "One day at a time," he said as they stretched. "That's what Doc Chen says. One day, one choice, one step." They ran at Thompson's pace, which was barely more than a jog. But he made it 3 miles before having to stop, which Derek said was impressive for someone in his condition. "You saved my squad in Kandahar," Thompson said as they cooled down. "Now you're saving me again." "You're saving yourself," Mark corrected. "I just pointed you toward help. That's what you did in Kandahar too, pointed us toward safety, then covered our retreat. You were always better at the protecting than the killing." We all were. We just forgot sometimes. That afternoon, Mark was helping Tyler with basketball practice in the park when a group of young men approached. Mark tensed, ready for trouble, but they stopped at a respectful distance. "Mr. Davis," one of them said, "we were at the assembly. What you said, it changed things for us. We wanted to thank you." "No thanks necessary." "Actually, there is. We were planning something stupid, a fight club thing, trying to be tough. After hearing you and Mr. Hoffman speak, we realized we were just scared kids trying to prove something that didn't need proving." Tyler stepped forward. "You're the guys from Jimmy's crew." "Yeah, Jimmy's still being an idiot, but the rest of us are out. We signed up for the Safe Strength workshops." After they left, Tyler looked at his father with pride. "You did that. You changed their minds. Derek did it. The coalition did it. I just told the truth." "The truth needed your voice to be heard." That evening, Mark's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Davis, this is Michael Chen." David Chen's father, my son is the one your boy protected at school. I hope David's okay. He is, thanks to Tyler, but I'm calling about something else. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I've been following the story since the Mortons video. The copycats, the coalition, your speech. It's become something bigger than just a viral video. It's become a conversation about masculinity, violence, and what real strength means in modern society. I'm not interested in being in a documentary. I understand. But this isn't just about you anymore. It's about Derek's transformation, the coalition's work, the kids choosing different paths. Your story started it, but it's become everyone's story. Would you at least consider letting me film the coalition's workshops? No interviews with you, unless you change your mind, just documenting the positive changes happening. Mark thought about it. The attention was everything he'd tried to avoid, but maybe that was selfish. If the story could help others prevent violence, change. Minds, didn't he have an obligation to let it be told, "I'll think about it," he said. That's all I ask. Later that night, as Mark tucked Tyler in, something he still did occasionally, despite his son's age, Tyler asked a question that had been bothering him. Dad, do you regret that night at Morton's, not the fight, but going there at all? Mark sat on the edge of the bed, considering. No, because everything that's happened since Derek changing the coalition, forming kids, reconsidering violence, none of that happens without that night. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. So it was worth it. Ask me in a year. Change takes time to measure. As Mark prepared for bed himself, his phone showed one new message. It was from Colonel Patterson, the Delta Force commander he'd blocked. The message had come through a different number. Mark, I know you don't want to hear from me, but you should know something. What you're doing with this coalition, this message about protective strength, it's reaching active duty guys too. I've had 3 operators ask about transition programs after seeing your speech. You're helping brothers you don't even know about. That's real leadership. Proud of you, son. Patterson. Mark deleted the message but felt something shift inside him. Maybe this was what his military service had been preparing him for, not the violence, but the credibility to speak against it. The authority to say that real strength wasn't about domination, but about protection, not about winning, but about building. He thought about Tyler's question. Was it worth it? The disruption to their quiet life, the exposure, the responsibility of being a symbol he never wanted to be. Looking through his bedroom door at Tyler's room, remembering the pride in his son's eyes, thinking about the kids who'd changed their minds about Derek's transformation, about Thompson getting help. Mark thought maybe it was. The construction site would be there Monday morning. He'd frame walls, pour concrete, build something tangible and lasting. But perhaps he was building something else too. Something less visible but no less real. A different definition of strength. A better model of masculinity. A world where his son could grow up understanding that real power came not from the ability to destroy, but from the choice to create. Not from domination, but from protection. Not from violence, but from the courage to be vulnerable, to be human, to be whole. The construction site at dawn had always been Mark's sanctuary, but Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Bill was waiting by the tool shed with a woman Mark didn't recognize, middle-aged, wearing practical clothes and work boots that had seen actual use. She had the weathered look of someone who'd spent years in the field, and her handshake was firm when Bill introduced her. Mark, this is Sarah Martinez from Habitat for Humanity. She has a proposition you might want to hear. Sarah got straight to the point. Mr. Davis, we've been following your story, the coalition you're building. We'd like to partner with you on a project combining construction skills training with your safe strength philosophy. Teaching young men not just how to build houses, but how to build character. Mark set down his tool belt, intrigued despite himself. What exactly are you proposing? A 12-week program. Mornings on construction sites learning actual trade skills. Afternoons in workshops learning emotional regulation, conflict resolution, the things your coalition teaches. These would be at-risk youth kids who are one bad decision away from prison or worse. We provide them with an alternative path, honest work, real skills, and a different definition of what it means to be strong. Why me? There are plenty of construction workers who could teach these skills. But none with your story, your credibility. These kids won't listen to another social worker or well-meaning volunteer. But you, a Delta Force operator who chose construction over violence, who stood up to a bully without destroying him. You're speaking their language while showing them a different vocabulary. Mark looked at Bill, who nodded encouragingly. I've already talked to the company. They're willing to donate materials and my time to supervise. It's good PR for them, and honestly, it's good work. When would this start? Next month, if you're willing. We have funding for 20 participants in the first cohort. If it works, we expand. Mark thought about Tyler, about the kids who'd approached him in the park, about Thompson fighting to stay sober, about all the young men searching for meaning in a world that told them domination was strength. I'll do it on one condition. Derek Hoffman and the other coalition instructors are full partners. This isn't the Mark Davis show. It's about the message, not the messenger. Sarah smiled. Already talked to Mr. Hoffman. He's on board if you are. That evening, Mark found Tyler doing homework at the kitchen table, his jaw still showing faint bruising from the school incident. The news about the Habitat program seemed to energize him. That's amazing, Dad. You're going to be teaching kids to build things instead of break them. It's more complicated than that. These are going to be tough kids, probably angry, definitely skeptical. Some of them might be gang-affiliated, drug-involved. It's not going to be easy. Nothing important ever is, Tyler said, echoing words Mark had told him years ago. Can I help? You want to help. I'm 16, Dad. Some of these kids won't be much older than me. Maybe they need to see someone their age who chose a different path. Mark felt the familiar surge of pride and concern that came with watching his son grow into his own person. We'll see. Let's start with you healing up from your last intervention. The week progressed with a strange new rhythm. Mornings at the construction site, evenings planning the Habitat program with Sarah and Derek, weekends maintaining the rituals that kept him grounded, the Saturday runs, Sunday basketball with Tyler. But Thursday brought another disruption. Mark was installing drywall when his phone rang with Jennifer's number. Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Mark Tyler's missing. The words hit like a physical blow. What do you mean missing? He left school at lunch and hasn't come back. It's been 3 hours. The school called me when he didn't show up for 5th period. I've tried calling him, but his phone's off. Mark was already moving, grabbing his keys, his mind shifting into operational mode, assess, analyze, act. Did he say anything this morning? Was he upset? No, he seemed fine. Happy even talking about the Habitat program. I'm on my way to the school. Call me if you hear anything. The drive to Tyler's school was a blur of controlled panic. Mark's mind ran through scenarios, accident, abduction, running away. None of them made sense. Tyler was level-headed, responsible, not the type to disappear without word. Dr. Washington met him at the entrance, her face grave. Mr. Davis, we've reviewed security footage. Tyler left voluntarily, but he was with someone, an older teenager we don't recognize. Show me. The grainy footage showed Tyler walking out with a young man, maybe 18 or 19, wearing a hoodie that obscured his face. Tyler didn't appear to be under duress, but something about his body language seemed off-tense, uncertain. Have you called the police? We were waiting for you since he left voluntarily, and it's only been a few hours. Call them now. As Dr. Washington made the call, Mark's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A single line, "Your son is safe. Morton's Steakhouse. Come alone." Mark's blood went cold. Morton's, where everything had started. This wasn't random. Someone was making a statement, likely another copycat seeking viral fame, but this time they'd involved Tyler. He showed the message to Dr. Washington, who immediately wanted to alert the police, but Mark knew that could escalate things, put Tyler in danger. "Give me 30 minutes, he said. "If you don't hear from me, send everyone." "Mr. Davis, you can't..." But he was already gone. The drive to Morton's was the longest 15 minutes of Mark's life. His training kept him focused, but underneath the operational calm was a father's terror. Tyler was everything. Without him, none of the rest mattered. The restaurant was less crowded than it had been that night 3 weeks ago, a late lunch crowd rather than the dinner rush. Mark entered to find a scene that was eerily familiar, yet different. In the same corner where he and Tyler had sat, his son was now seated across from someone Mark recognized with a jolt, Jimmy Pearson. The kid from school who'd started the fight, Tyler had stopped. But Jimmy wasn't alone. 3 other young men stood nearby, all filming with their phones. And standing behind Tyler, hand resting on his shoulder in a gesture that was both casual and threatening, was someone Mark didn't recognize, older Harder with prison tattoos visible on his neck. "Dad?" Tyler said, his voice steady, but his eyes showing fear. "I'm okay." "Let him go," Mark said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded soldiers in combat. The tattooed man smiled. "The famous Mark Davis. Dad force himself. My little brother here tells me you're the reason he's gone soft. Says your speech made him think violence is wrong. I thought we should have a conversation about that." Mark assessed the situation tactically. 4 potential hostiles, multiple recording devices, civilian bystanders who could be caught in crossfire if things went bad, and Tyler in the middle of it all. "You're Jimmy's brother, Yatsu. Jake Pearson. Did a nickel in Huntsville for aggravated assault. Got out 6 months ago. Been trying to teach Jimmy how to be a man, but your little presentation confused him. And you thought taking my son would prove something. Not taking, inviting. See, Jimmy told Tyler we wanted to talk, set things right. Your boy came willingly. Brave kid. Stupid, but brave." Tyler started to speak, but Jake's hand tightened on his shoulder, silencing him. Mark saw his son wince and felt rage build in his chest, not the hot anger of the untrained, but the cold fury that had once made him lethal in combat. "Here's what's going to happen," Jake continued. "You're going to admit that all that peaceful warrior bullshit is just that bullshit. You're going to show everyone that when it counts, violence is what matters, and you're going to do it by fighting me. And if I refuse, then we leave with Tyler and this conversation continues elsewhere, somewhere without witnesses." The threat was clear, and Mark knew Jake was probably serious. Prison had a way of removing inhibitions about violence, and someone fresh out often had something to prove. "Dad, don't," Tyler said. "He doesn't matter. What he thinks doesn't matter." Jake laughed. "Kid's got heart. Must get it from his mother because his father's just standing there." Mark took a step forward, then another, moving with the deliberate pace of someone who'd learned that rushing into violence was rarely the answer. He stopped just outside of striking distance, close enough to act if needed, but far enough to maintain options. "You want to prove violence matters," Mark said. "Fine. You've already proven it. You took my son. You're threatening a child. You've shown everyone here that you're exactly the kind of man I was warning against, someone so insecure in his own worth that he needs to dominate others to feel significant. Big words from a killer. Yeah, I know about you. Delta Force 43 confirmed kills. You think you can just walk away from that, pretend to be normal? I don't pretend anything. Every life I took weighs on me. Every morning I wake up and choose to be better than I was trained to be. That's not weakness. That's the hardest fight there is." Jake pulled out a knife, the blade catching the restaurant's ambient lighting. Several patrons gasped, some fleeing, others pulling out phones to record. "How about now still want to talk about choice and peace?" Mark's entire body shifted almost imperceptibly. Weight redistributing, hands positioning. Everyone in the room felt the change, the predator awakening, but his voice remained calm. "You pull a knife on my son, and all choices end. Not for me, for you. I've been showing restraint because I believe in second chances, because your brother is just a confused kid, because violence should be the last option. But if you don't put that knife away in the next 3 seconds, you'll learn what special operations really means." Something in Mark's eyes must have penetrated Jake's prison-hardened bravado because his hand wavered. In that moment of uncertainty, Tyler acted. He grabbed a water glass from the table and threw it at Jake's face, then rolled sideways off his chair as Jake instinctively flinched. Mark moved faster than anyone in the room could follow. The knife was out of Jake's hand. Jake was on the ground, and Mark had him in a control hold that looked effortless but had the man gasping in pain. "Jimmy?" Mark said, not even breathing hard. "Come here." The younger Pearson approached tentatively, his phone forgotten in his hand. "Your brother needs help," Mark said. Prison didn't rehabilitate him, it just taught him to hide his violence better. He's going to end up back inside or dead if he keeps this path. You can follow him or you can choose differently. But if you ever come near my son again, if you ever threaten another student, I won't be this gentle." He released Jake, who scrambled to his feet, cradling his arm. The rage in his eyes was mixed with something else, now fear, and maybe a flicker of understanding. "This isn't over," Jake said, but it sounded more like a plea than a threat. "Yes, it is," Mark replied. "Because you're going to walk out of here, and you're going to think about what just happened. You came here with numbers, with weapons, with every advantage, and you lost without me throwing a single punch. That's what training and discipline look like. That's what real strength is, knowing you can destroy someone and choosing not to." Jake looked at his brother, then at Tyler, who was standing now shaken but unharmed. Something passed between the brothers' disappointment from Jimmy, shame from Jake. They left without another word, their friends trailing behind them. Mark immediately went to Tyler, checking him for injuries, pulling him into a fierce hug that his son returned without teenage embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Dad." Jimmy said he wanted to apologize to talk things out. You thought you could help, I know, but Tyler, you can't save everyone. Some people don't want to be saved." The police arrived minutes later, followed by Jennifer, who was frantic. Statements were given, videos were reviewed, and Jake Pearson was arrested on charges of kidnapping, assault, and terrorist threats. Jimmy was taken in for questioning, but would likely avoid charges given his age and cooperation. That evening, after the chaos had settled and Tyler was safe at home, Mark sat with his son on their small balcony looking out over the city lights. "I was scared today," Tyler admitted. "When Jake pulled that knife, I thought, I know, I was scared too." "You didn't look scared. You looked dangerous." Mark chose his words carefully. "I was both. Fear and capability aren't mutually exclusive. I was terrified for you, and that fear made me dangerous. But I controlled it, channeled it. That's the difference between a protector and a predator." "Is Jake going back to prison?" "Probably. He violated parole by carrying a weapon and committing assault. But prison won't fix what's broken in him. It'll just delay the inevitable." "What about Jimmy?" "Jimmy has a choice to make. He can follow his brother's path or forge his own. Today might have shown him where his brother's path leads." Tyler was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Did you mean what you said about not throwing a punch?" "Being real strength." Every word. Jake expected violence. He was prepared for it, even wanted it. By not giving him what he expected, I took away his power. Violence would have validated his worldview. Restraint challenged it. "But you would have hurt him if he'd hurt me." "Without hesitation," Mark admitted. That's the paradox of being a protector. You have to be capable of violence while choosing peace. You have to be dangerous enough that your choice of restraint means something. The next morning brought another media storm. The new incident at Morton's, videos of Mark's restraint in the face of a knife-wielding attacker, Tyler's brave escape, it all went viral within hours. But this time, the narrative was different. The comments focused on Mark's control. His choice not to destroy someone who threatened his child, the way he'd turned a violent confrontation into a teaching moment. Derek called early. "You've done it again. But this time you've shown something even more important than the first video. You've shown that strength isn't just about capability, it's about choice." It shouldn't have happened at all. Tyler shouldn't have been involved. But he was, and he handled himself well. "You've raised a good kid, Mark. One who tries to help others even when it's dangerous." Sarah Martinez from Habitat called next. "After yesterday, we've had 50 more applications for the program. Everyone wants to learn what you call real strength. We might need to expand faster than planned." Michael Chen, the documentary filmmaker, sent a text. "This story keeps evolving. Please consider letting me document it properly. The world needs to see this." But the message that mattered most came from Tyler's school. Dr. Washington reported that Jimmy Pearson had come to her office that morning voluntarily asking to be enrolled in counseling and the Safe Strength workshops. He'd also written a letter of apology to Tyler and David Chen. "He seemed different," Dr. Washington said. Seeing his brother in action, seeing where that path leads, changed something in him. That Saturday, Mark's regular run with Derek had unexpected additions. Thompson was there, looking healthier, having strung together 2 weeks of sobriety. But so were 3 other veterans who'd heard about the informal support group forming around these morning runs. "Word spreads," Thompson explained. "Guys coming home trying to figure out how to be normal, they need examples. You're showing us it's possible." They ran as a group, different paces accommodated, no one left behind. It reminded Mark of patrol movements in Afghanistan, the strong protecting the vulnerable, everyone making it home together. As they cooled down, one of the new veterans, a young woman named Maria, who'd lost her left leg to an IED, asked the question Mark had been expecting. How do you deal with the dreams? The memories, I can't shake them. Mark considered his answer. You don't shake them. You integrate them. The dreams are your mind trying to process experiences that don't fit normal life. Fighting them makes them stronger. Accepting them, understanding them, that takes away their power. But how? By building something better. Every good thing you do, every person you help, every positive choice you make, that's you writing a new chapter. The old chapters don't disappear, but they become part of a larger story, one where you're the hero, not the victim. Derek added, that's what the Safe Strength Coalition is really about. Not forgetting who we were, but choosing who we become. The following week, the Habitat program officially launched. 20 young men ages 17 to 24 most, with records all with attitudes gathered at a construction site in East Austin. Mark stood before them in work clothes, Tyler beside him as a peer mentor. Gentlemen, Mark began, you're here because someone believes you can change. Maybe it's a parent, a parole officer, a judge. But that doesn't matter. What matters is whether you believe it. One kid couldn't have been more than 18 spoke up with practiced bravado. Why should we listen to you, old man? Before Mark could respond, Tyler stepped forward. Because 2 weeks ago, someone put a knife to my throat and my father could have killed him. Easy. Instead, he showed mercy. He showed that real strength isn't about what you can do, it's about what you choose to do. That's what you're here to learn. The kid looked between Tyler and Mark, the bravado fading. Your pops is really Delta Force. Mark corrected. Now I'm a construction worker. And for the next 12 weeks, I'm your instructor. You're going to learn to build houses for families who need them. You're going to learn skills that can earn you honest money. And you're going to learn that creating something is infinitely more satisfying than destroying it. The first day was rough. Half the group was skeptical, a quarter was hostile, and the rest were just going through the motions to satisfy probation requirements. But Mark had dealt with resistant recruits before. He paired them up, gave them tasks that required cooperation, and let the work itself be the teacher. By the end of the week, he saw the first breakthrough. A kid named Marcus, who'd been tagged for gang recruitment, spent an entire afternoon perfecting a corner joint in the framing. When it finally came together perfectly, his face lit up with genuine pride. I made that, Marcus said, running his hand along the smooth joint. Nobody can take that away from me. That's right, Mark confirmed. Every skill you learn, everything you build becomes part of who you are. No one can steal knowledge. No one can revoke experience. This is yours forever. That evening, Tyler helped Mark clean up the site. They worked in comfortable silence until Tyler said, some of those guys remind me of Jimmy before he changed. Angry at everything because they don't know what else to be. Anger is often fear wearing armor, Mark replied. They're afraid they don't matter, that they have no value beyond their ability to intimidate. We're showing them different ways to matter. Is it working? Ask me in 11 weeks. The second week brought challenges. 2 participants got into a fight over a perceived slight old patterns asserting themselves. Mark didn't break it up immediately, letting them exhaust themselves, then had them sit with Derek for an hour discussing what had triggered them. You felt disrespected, Derek told them. But respect isn't taken, it's earned. And you don't earn it by fighting. You earn it by controlling yourself when fighting would be easier. By the third week, the group had developed a rhythm. Mornings were spent learning construction skills, afternoons in workshops. Mark taught them about structural integrity, both in buildings and in character. Derek taught them about discipline and emotional regulation. Other coalition instructors taught conflict resolution, financial literacy, basic life skills many had never learned. Tyler became an unexpected bridge between the instructors and participants. His age made him relatable. His experience with violence at school gave him credibility, and his obvious respect for his father showed them what a healthy male relationship could look like. One afternoon, as they were raising a wall frame together, Marcus asked Mark, "You really killed 43 people." The question silenced the entire worksite. Mark set down his hammer, giving the question the weight it deserved. I did. Each one in combat, each one to protect others, and each one haunts me. Not because they didn't deserve to die, many were truly evil people doing terrible things. They haunt me because every death, even necessary ones, tears something in the fabric of the world. It creates absence where there was presence, grief where there was love, emptiness where there was possibility. But they were enemies. They were also sons, brothers, fathers, just like you, just like me. The moment you forget that your enemy is human, you lose your own humanity. Marcus was quiet, then asked, "Is that why you do construction now, to balance it out?" "Partly. Every house I help build might shelter a family for generations. Every structure might host birthday parties, holiday dinners, first steps, last breaths, all the moments that make life worth living. It doesn't erase the deaths, but it adds to the life side of the ledger." Michael Chen had been documenting the program with Mark's reluctant permission, capturing these moments without intrusion. One day he showed Mark some of the footage young men learning, growing, changing. "This is powerful," Michael said. "It shows transformation in real time." "Just make sure it shows the whole truth," Mark replied. "Not just the success stories, but the struggles, the setbacks, the daily choice to keep trying. Change isn't a moment, it's a process." Week 6 brought a crisis. Jake Pearson was released on bail, and he showed up at the construction site with 2 friends looking for trouble. The participants immediately went into defensive mode, old instincts kicking in. Mark saw hands reaching for tools that could become weapons, saw bodies tensing for violence. "Stand down," Mark commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Everyone back to work. This is my situation to handle." He walked toward Jake, noting the man's dilated pupils, the aggressive posture the friends positioned for flanking movements. Jake was high on something, probably meth, which made him unpredictable and dangerous. "You cost me everything," Jake snarled. "My brother won't talk to me. My parole officer's up my ass. Everyone thinks I'm a joke because you punked me without throwing a punch." "You cost yourself everything," Mark replied calmly. "I just held up a mirror." Jake pulled a gun, and everything changed. The construction site erupted in panic, workers scattering, but Mark didn't move. He couldn't not, with 20 young men watching, learning, taking their cues from him. "You going to shoot me, Jake? In front of all these witnesses, all these cameras, you think that makes you strong? Shut up. Your brother's watching." Mark continued, having spotted Jimmy among the program participants he'd joined after the second incident. "You really want him to see you murder an unarmed man? You want that to be his last memory of you before you go away forever." Jake's hand shook the gun, wavering. His friends had already started backing away, wanting no part of murder. In that moment of uncertainty, Mark made a choice that would later be debated endlessly online. He turned his back on Jake and walked away. The symbolism was devastating. Here was an armed, dangerous man, and Mark was showing him the ultimate disrespect, not considering him enough of a threat to face. The psychological impact was immediate. Jake lowered the gun, his face crumbling from rage to despair. "Look at me," Jake screamed. "I said look at me!" Mark stopped but didn't turn. "I've seen enough, Jake. You're not a warrior. You're not a soldier. You're not even a good criminal. You're just a scared boy who never learned how to be a man, and now it's too late. The only person who can save you is you, and you're not strong enough to do it." The police arrived minutes later, having been called the moment Jake appeared. He was arrested without resistance, the fight completely gone out of him. As he was led away, he looked broken, defeated in a way that no physical beating could have achieved. Jimmy approached Mark afterward, tears streaming down his face. "He's my brother. I should hate you for what you just did to him." "Do you?" "No, I hate him for making you do it, and I hate myself for not seeing what he really was sooner." "Don't hate," Mark said. "Understand? Your brother is a cautionary tale, an example of what happens when strength is confused with violence, when respect is demanded instead of earned. Learn from his mistakes." That night, Tyler asked his father about the gun incident. "Weren't you scared when you turned your back?" "Terrified," Mark admitted. "But I knew Jake. I'd studied him, understood him. He needed an audience, needed validation. By denying him both, I took away his power. It was a calculated risk." "What if you'd been wrong? Then you'd have learned a different lesson today, that sometimes principles are worth dying for, and that your father loved you enough to show you what real courage looks like." "That's messed up, Dad. Yes, it is, but so is a world where men like Jake think guns make them strong. Someone has to show them differently.